Imagine boarding a Northwest Orient Airlines flight on a chilly November evening in 1971, the cabin's warm glow contrasting with the biting cold outside. You settle into your seat, expectant of nothing more than a routine journey from Portland to Seattle. The flight attendants smile politely as they pass through the rows, and the hum of the engines is a familiar lullaby. Then, just after takeoff, the man seated at 18C leans over and hands a note to a flight attendant, a note that will change his life and ours forever. It was November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve, when a man identifying himself as Dan Cooper quietly signaled to a flight attendant that he had a bomb in his briefcase. He handed her a handwritten note demanding $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon landing. Pause for a moment and imagine the tension in the cabin. The soft rustle of paper as the flight attendant's eyes dart over the note, her heart pounding as she processes the threat. Meanwhile, Cooper's demeanor is calm, almost matter-of-fact, his dark sunglasses hiding any trace of fear or ambition. He sets the note aside but says nothing aloud, issuing an unspoken command that will keep everyone on edge for the next several hours. Once the plane touches down at Seattle-Tacoma Airport, passengers are released as hostages and herded onto buses under dim floodlights. On the tarmac, Cooper is escorted to a waiting car that delivers the ransom money strapped to his body. Investigators later determined that the bills were fresh, unmarked, and in denominations of 20. Exactly 10,000 crisp $20 bills. He also receives 4 parachutes, 2 primary parachutes and 2 dummy ones designed to confuse any would-be followers. As dusk falls, Cooper allows the last of the hostages to disembark and orders the pilots to take off again, heading toward Mexico City with instructions to fly low and slow. The raw power of the Pratt & Whitney engines vibrates through the cabin as the aircraft roars down the runway, lifting into the darkening sky. Inside the cockpit, Captain William Scott and First Officer Gordon Vett comply with every demand, flying at an altitude of roughly 10,000 feet, with flaps and landing gear lowered to reduce airspeed. The Canadian Rockies pass unseen beneath the clouds, and the plane's interior lights remain dimmed, lending an eerie hush to the cabin. He instructs the flight engineer to maintain cabin pressure at a near-frigid 10,000 feet, equivalent to make opening the aft stairs possible. Then, somewhere over the densely forested terrain of southwestern Washington, Cooper springs into action. As the aft stairs deploy, the roar of rushing wind fills the cabin. A lone figure strides calmly to the back, gripping his handful of money and the loaded parachute pack. It is the last time anyone on the plane sees Dan Cooper. Moments later, the sound of wind rushing through the open doorway, the snap of fabric against metal, and that solitary figure disappearing into the night. Captain Scott later recounts how he felt a sudden lurch, as though the aircraft had been jostled from beneath. And then nothing, only the steady hum of the engines and the faint scent of burning fuel. He radioed the tower to confirm that the stairs were still deployed. When he looked back, he saw that the staircase had vanished, spinning away into the clouds like a ghostly spiral. Investigators quickly swarmed the skies, dropping flares and scanning the moonlit treetops for any sign of parachute or man. Search parties combed the rugged forest floor, manhunts stretched across state lines, and by dawn, the reality set in. Dan Cooper had vanished, like a shadow dissolving at sunrise. As word of the daring crime spread, American headlines christened him D.B. Cooper, a media shorthand combining a reporter's misheard moniker with the mystery surrounding his identity. Some insisted his name was Joe, others called him Dan. But the FBI adopted D.B. Cooper, and so the name became legend. In the days, weeks, and decades that followed, a parade of suspects entered and exited in the minds of the public. Was he a disgruntled war veteran with specialized training? A disgruntled airline employee seeking revenge? Or perhaps someone with an inside connection, a man obsessed with aviation, familiar with the Boeing 727's rear staircase mechanism? Some pointed to Lynn "Zip" Jeffs, who noted that Cooper purchased his one-way ticket with cash, avoiding any traceable paper trail. He was described by witnesses as a middle-aged man, between 5'10" and 6 feet tall, dressed in a dark business suit, black tie, white shirt, and a neatly folded handkerchief in his breast pocket. His airtight proficiency suggested someone well-practiced in the art of subterfuge and intimidation. One of the earliest and most talked-about suspects was Robert Rackstraw, a decorated Army veteran and former pilot whose life was peppered with mysterious travel, dubious connections, and contradictory statements. In 2006, the FBI interviewed Rackstraw under the suspicion that his military training fit the profile of someone capable of pulling off such a precise heist. But alibis, conflicting timelines, and lack of concrete evidence led investigators to eliminate him from official consideration. Then there is Dwayne Weber, a small-town pilot with a penchant for the spotlight. On his deathbed in 1995, Weber allegedly whispered to his wife, "I'm D.B. Cooper, but don't tell anyone." His widow, plagued by guilt and medical bills, went public with the claim years later, producing photos that showed a striking resemblance to the FBI's composite sketch. She also produced telegrams of lingering airfare balances that coincided with the timeline. Yet skeptics pointed out discrepancies. Federal records indicated Weber was under investigation for unrelated crimes during that period, and DNA analysis on a letter supposedly sent by Cooper did not match Weber's family members. Another tantalizing theory centers on a man named Kenneth Christensen, a Northwest Orient employee who disappeared shortly after the hijacking. Christensen was familiar with the 727, adept at parachuting, and worked for the airline that Cooper boarded. He died in 1994, but before his death, he reportedly confessed to a cousin that he was involved in the hijacking. However, scrutiny of his employment records and DNA from Cooper's severed tie kept in FBI files did not definitively link him. Some propose that Cooper was not a lone wolf, but part of a broader network, a seasoned group of criminals who meticulously planned the heist. Others believe he was a simple opportunist who seized a once-in-a-lifetime opening, a routine pre-flight at the counter, a quiet moment to slip away undetected. Each theory emerges from fragments of evidence, newspaper clippings, eyewitness memories, and the ever-present aura of speculation that surrounds unsolved mysteries. What stands out, however, is how each possible identity carries both compelling arguments and nagging inconsistencies, leaving us suspended between suspicion and wonder. For decades, the FBI maintained an unbroken investigation. In 2016, they officially announced that the case would be transferred to the archives, but not before releasing thousands of pages of files, interviews, and photographs for public scrutiny. Those documents revealed tantalizing new leads and fresh suspects, each emerging like a ghost from old records. One recently rediscovered piece of evidence is a memo from an FBI agent noting that a man named William J. Smith, a former paratrooper, was observed in a bar the morning after the hijacking, boasting cryptically that he flew a plane in last night. Witnesses described him wearing a cobalt blue suit, much like Cooper's, though without the informant's name. The lead went cold. Another, less publicized suspect is a man named Robert W. Rackstraw Jr., not to be confused with the Robert Rackstraw mentioned earlier. He was a private pilot with a history of forging legal documents, recording false flight hours, and disappearing for days at a time. Investigators discovered that a pilot's license issued to him matched long unused credentials found in Cooper's luggage, though direct proof connecting them was never found. Digitally enhanced audio records from the cockpit exchange during the hijacking have also surfaced, allowing experts to isolate Cooper's voice more clearly. Linguists analyzing his inflections noted a Pacific Northwest accent, subtle vowel shifts that pointed to possible origins in the Portland accent of the early 1970s. New dialect studies suggested he might have attended college in Washington state, offering fresh leads for genealogists and amateur sleuths. Then there is the tantalizing story of a young boy who lived less than a mile from the suspected drop zone in southern Washington. Decades later, as he sifted through old family belongings, he discovered a charter membership card for a skydiving club, dated 1971, bearing the name Dan Cooper. When brought to the attention of investigators, the find sparked renewed interest, but the card's authenticity was debated. Was it a heartfelt keepsake, or a fake fabricated by a teenager with an overactive imagination? In recent years, cold case units have utilized advanced forensic techniques, DNA phenotyping, isotope analysis, and genetic genealogy to narrow down potential suspects. They have cross-referenced Cooper's hair follicles found in an envelope mailed to a newspaper with vast genealogical databases, leading to distant relatives who may hold the key to his true identity. Some family members reported a long-dead uncle who vanished under mysterious circumstances around the same period, re-emerging with sudden wealth and refusing to disclose how he obtained it. Despite these flashes of promise, definitive answers remain elusive. The FBI's official stance that the case is unsolved still holds, while private investigators, true crime podcasters, and random armchair detectives continue to comb through every shred of information, hoping for that one breakthrough that will unlock the Cooper cipher once and for all. In 1980, nearly a decade after the hijacking, a 10-year-old boy named Brian Ingram discovered a rotting knapsack on the banks of the Columbia River, not far from the town of Ariel, Washington. Inside were 8 bundles of the original ransom money, $5,800 and 20 bills, numbering 295 bills in total. Many of the bills bore serial numbers that matched those listed in FBI records, a startling confirmation that at least some of Cooper's loot had survived the wilderness. Examine the edges of those bills, and you will find subtle creases, periods of discoloration, and faint smudges of what might be river silt or human sweat. Tiny testaments to the perilous journey they endured. Investigators noted that the stacks were neatly rubber-banded with blue-tinted bands, identical to those used in the initial distribution, suggesting Cooper had packed them carefully before his leap into darkness. Some of the bills carried fingerprints inconclusive to any known perpetrator, but others bore partial imprints that forensic experts in the 1970s struggled to match with the limited technology of the time. Today, modern fingerprint enhancement techniques have reignited interest. Analysts scanned those partial prints with high-resolution lasers, producing ridge patterns that hint at a male suspect with medium-large hands, a detail that, while not definitive, narrows the field. Other researchers focused on the water damage. They traced the mineral composition of the sediment on the bills, comparing it with soil samples from various probable drop zones. By isolating trace elements, silica, iron oxides, and rare earth metals, they could link the bills to a specific confluence of streams near the Lewis County border, suggesting Cooper may have shimmied down an embankment, surrendering his cash to the current as he vanished into the night. Then there are the less tangible clues, like the perforations along one edge of a bill where Cooper's briefcase may have scraped against a rivet or seam, hinting at how he carried the money during his escape. Microabrasion analysts have, in recent years, magnified those tiny tears to deduce the type of leather grain it passed against, some suggesting a high-end briefcase made in Europe, perhaps by the German craftsman Louis Vuitton, whose cases retailed for hundreds of dollars in the early 70s. Finally, the bundles themselves hold quiet mysteries. Experts observed that the rubber bands constraining the stacks bore slight variations in color, some a lighter cerulean, others a deeper teal, possibly the result of different manufacturing batches. While it may seem trivial, rubber compound chemists told investigators that these dye variations were phased out by May of 1971. Cooper's choice to use these specific bands might point to someone with access to the early stock of currency handling supplies, perhaps an employee at a bank in Portland or Seattle who stocked the cash 1 month before the robbery. Each thread of evidence in those waterlogged bills weaves a tapestry of subtle clues. A fingerprint pattern here, a smudge of mineral here, a colored band there, hinting at a story that lies just beyond our grasp. And yet, every detail only deepens the mystery, reminding us how one man's leap into the night can scatter breadcrumbs that refuse to form a clear path. As you imagine the cold wind enveloping that lone figure as he parachuted into the dark, pine-fringed forests below Mount St. Helens' looming shadow, you sense that Cooper's story transcends mere crime. It is a tale of audacity and ambition, of human cunning tested against vast, unforgiving wilderness. It is, perhaps, a reflection of our own fascination with the unknown, how we chase glimmers of truth through decades of rumor, hoping to land on firm ground. For 50 years, the FBI, and countless private sleuths have pursued him across state lines, through riverbanks and forests, scanning dollar bills and listening for whispered confessions. Yet Cooper remains just beyond our reach, a silhouette against the moonlit sky, a secret tucked into the folds of a rotting knapsack, a ghost that haunts the edges of our collective imagination. So the next time you handle a crisp $20 bill, look closely at its worn corners, its faint numerical code, and remember that somewhere in its fibers lies the story of a man who vanished on wings of wind and left behind more questions than answers. Because in the end, D.B. Cooper reminds us that some mysteries are not meant to be fully solved, but to live on as legends, testaments to the enduring power of the unknown.